Welcome to the Michigan Runner Show. Join us each time as we explore the people, the places, and the events that shape our great sport.
Hi, I'm Jenny McCafferty, and I'm in Huntington Woods, Michigan, and we have a very special guest today. He's Maury Dean. How are you doing, Maury?
I'm doing very well, Jenny. Nice to see you again.
Yes, it's very exciting to get together after people have been quarantined for too many months. What we're here to talk about today is this book. I can't hold it very long because it's like almost 6 pounds, and you're responsible for it.
I take full responsibility. Yeah. It's the world's biggest jumbo pamphlet.
Well, I'm not even all the way through it, and I've had a blast. It's really a lot of fun. It's, as you put it, it's a memoir, but throughout you're providing advice to runners, which is part of what makes it really interesting. Tell us a little bit more about how you got started on this big project.
Well, I ended up with a series of logbooks, and then I ended up with, much more importantly, a series of friends in the Bohemia Track Club that my wife Tony was in as well. And then, of course, I always ran in Michigan because I started out here at Dearborn High. And so naturally, there are many stories unfolded in all of the races. And so I took it upon myself to try to write them down and, you know, make heroes out of the people who already were anyhow, but the people out there didn't know it.
One of the things I thought was pretty interesting was, and there's a quote from the beginning, why our glory days can help inspire yours. So in many ways, your audience is people who want to run faster.
That's right. The demographic for this book is everyone who's ever run around the block or thought about running around the block. You know, it covers the Olympic champions, but it also covers the local circuit runners and what I like to call second-string superstars. And it covers everyone who's ever run or went to the local 5K for fun or for charity or anything else. It covers the world of running. And I like to illuminate the stories of all these good people because they deserve to be in books just like the big baseball, football, basketball stars.
Well, that's really what makes it fun, is because there's stories of so many familiar people. And I also want to mention that you have another huge interest, and you've written about it a lot, and that is music.
Yes.
In fact, you have a book in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Tell us about that.
It all began back when I was in graduate school, and my wife Tony was working at the city of Detroit as a recreation instructor, and I started skipping class because I had this vision. I wanted to write the history of rock and roll, which was only 10 years old or so at the time. And so I had no resources except my imagination and remembering names of songs. And in 3 weeks, I wrote longhand, a history of the rock and roll called The Rock Revolution. And it got printed, and it did pretty well in Detroit, 95 cents. And it's the only time in my life I could write a book 144 pages long. I have chapters longer than that.
So rock and roll itself is interesting. How did you get, well, this is a silly question for anybody of our generation, how did you get interested in rock and roll?
I couldn't help myself. It was a little different from some of the syrupy romantic songs of the early 50s. And it was, you know, talking about my generation. And there was James Dean out there. My name was Maury Dean. And so he didn't even do rock and roll. But then Elvis arrived. And then when Buddy Holly started hiccuping, I became the ultimate fan. So, and then into the Beatles and so on.
I still think that our generation has the best music, but there we go.
I have to agree.
And also, baseball is another theme in which you show interest.
I grew up a Tiger fan. In New York, where we often live, you have 2 or 3 teams, and people, you know, they squabble with each other about which one is best. We don't have that problem here in Detroit. We root for the Tigers, you know, and even when they're in last place, and sometimes they're glorious. And so I wrote this book, Who's Your Tiger, which has been kind of in the basement at Co-America Park for a while. Now they put it up on the shelves at the end of last term, the end of the season.
Well, among the pieces of advice that I found really interesting in Glory Days was, we all know that we're supposed to run on the left. It's safer. But you actually tell us that it's 5 times safer. I want to know more about how you discovered that.
I researched it as best I could from several sources, and you get a variance there. But in terms of fatal accidents and so on, it seems like most of the people are on the right side of the road thinking it's the right side of the road, but it's the wrong side of the road. And so you can look through all publications by everyone, from Dr. Sheehan to Jim Fix to, all kinds of running writers over the years that, the safe side is facing the traffic. I got that from my mother when I was 4 years old, walking to a fireworks show in Rochester. We walked down a busy road, and she said, you must always be on the left. So I actually listened to my mother.
Okay, that's fair enough. That's pretty cool. Well, I've enjoyed the vignettes and the profiles you've written about so many people. I want to mention a couple of them. Ed Whitlock.
Ed Whitlock, an amazing runner. I was talking to Doug Goodhue, our national champion from Michigan, the other day, actually a week or maybe a little while ago. And he said he knew Ed Whitlock. And Ed was a fine runner. He broke records in every age group. And recently our own Doug is challenging him in some of those age groups. Ed was from Canada, as my father was, by way of Scotland. But Ed Whitlock got into marathon running because his son was interested in running, and he became a superstar later in life. And personally, I didn't do quite that well in high school in terms of my cross-country team. I couldn't get a varsity letter in high school, but I had to, get through the ranks and start running against county champions when I was in my 40s. So I sort of allied myself with Ed Whitlock along those lines.
Well, we had a chance to meet Ed when we covered many races in Canada for quite a few years, and he's a pretty cool guy. So it was neat that you mentioned him. And there are a couple of Michigan guys, Jim Forshee.
Jim Forshee, big Jim Forshee. I remember him and Jerry Johncock. They were always racing in their 70s and 80s. And I remember developing a great case of humility when once I ran what I thought was a super race at age 40 at the Bobby Crim. And I ran, although they got me in something like 59:04, I thought it said 58:58 because the clock always tries to grab a couple seconds. But so I thought I ran 58:58, and I was beaten by a 58-year-old man and his daughter who rode for Michigan Runner.
So John Cocco's always pretty interesting because he's still running. Yeah, I think he's like 99 by now or something. I'm close. And he always ran with a singlet, "Run for Jesus," and so that's all. That's how everybody knew who he was. Okay,
excellent. Can't have a better running partner in terms of maybe some blessedness involved. There are a whole lot of runners in New York Road Runners Club named Jesus. Okay. And so anyhow, yeah, Jerry Johncock, fine runner. Tomorrow we're going to see Harrison Hensley, one of Michigan's greatest runners. He's 89 and telling me to drink pomegranate juice.
And he's a great runner, but he's maybe more well known for his race, which is
Run Through Hell. We've run many times through hell. The last time was 2018, and right when we saw the devil by the side of the road, with the trident and the horns and the red suit, I was running with an angel. It was a young lady, about 40 or so. One of her wings had fallen off, and she was carrying it, and we crossed the line together. I think she beat me by 3 seconds, but I lucked out on that.
Did you run the 10-mile or what Harrison always called the Wimpy Race?
No, it was only a 4.8 Maybe it wasn't. Yeah, I ran the 4.8 mile race, which is like a 5 miler in terms of the hills and heat.
Anyway, Harrison's a character, and we've all been grateful to know him. And I also want to bring up Maggie Zadar.
Maggie Zadar is one of my favorite people. Her picture's in the book several times, including the Boston Strong item, where she was running the Boston Marathon the year after. She came very close to the Mad Bomber, who's now on trial again. And she's extremely brave. She's run 170 marathons or some such thing. I have to sit down when I just think about that. And, she's gone through some health issues and so on, and she keeps on going.
I think people have applied the term Energizer Bunny to Maggie because she's just so consistent. Yeah. So another guy that you mentioned was Joe Thornberg.
Joe Thornberg, I mentioned him more than once, and it's due to my rather complete collection of stats from races. I think I met Joe once, that was it. So I can't tell any good stories about Joe Thornberg. Maybe you can, but as far as I know, he's one of the top runners. And I want to take this time to congratulate you for your best of times that you worked on so hard all those many years. And my friend Ed Melnick would like to do so too. His name is, books by Maury Dean, stats by Statman Ed Melnick. And he did the Long Island version from 1981 to 2019 of all of the best times, 5-year age groups, for various distances from 5K on up to marathon. However, he didn't do 1992 through 95, which was my heyday, so I had to kind of fill that one in a little bit.
But people get really invested in those, and I remember some of the conversations I had with people who thought they should have been included.
Some of them were not pleasant conversations.
Yeah.
I remember telling Ed about that.
Yeah. Why don't you have a 25K or something? They wanted that distance. I wanted to finish up the Joe Thornberg story just because I met Joe, had a long conversation with him at, I think it was the Big Bird Run, and not too long after that he passed away. And I read his obituary and discovered that he not only went to Notre Dame, he graduated the same year my dad did from Notre Dame. And I wish I'd known it,
Incredible. Yeah. Jack Cohn is the quarterback at Notre Dame this year. He went to Sayville High School. And I have a report of a race, West Sayville, New York, where I happened to be in a 5K race, and I actually ran a minute faster than Jack Cohn. The only difference was he was 11 years old. But now he's their quarterback.
There's one other there's a lot of interesting people you mentioned, but one especially I wanted to bring up, and that's Ellen Page, whose resume is way more interesting than most people's.
What a hero, National Football League. And I think they fined him for getting down to 245 pounds so he could run the marathon. Yeah. I also have a story in there about a guy who is one of the heaviest runners of all time ever to run sub-18s for 5K, but that's another thing from New York.
Well, after Ellen Page ran the marathon, he got onto his new career, which was the law, and he eventually became chief justice, but a justice of the Minnesota Supreme Court.
Yes. There's such a poignant story about him. Did you read what I read?
Tell our viewers.
It was all about how he played, I believe it was it the tuba? Something, right? When people go by in the marathon, everyone claps. But he's out there playing his tuba. And not a lot of people can play a tuba, but he's big enough, strong enough. His wife had passed away, and everybody knew that. And people just stopped their own marathons and ran over to give him a hug or something, to tell him what a wonderful guy he was, and a great runner, too.
Pretty cool guy, and pretty much known as the best defensive lineman of his era.
Right.
Yeah.
And he broke 4 hours in the marathon.
after he lost all the weight. Yeah. So, talking about races, you have won some, including the Fountain Centennial 3-mile road one. What's it like to win a race?
I didn't know for 40 years. And then I didn't know for 40 years, for 30 years after that Tony won the race. It was her hometown. But then a snag came up just recently that maybe she was the second woman in the race, and that there was some high school hotshot who was a little ahead of her. But she was 9th overall out of 64 runners. And I just chased the fire engine. I had to drive 1,000 miles to this part of Michigan to find 64 runners slower than I was. And so it was the right time, and I think I ran 16 something or other. It was like a 17:35K. But at any rate, I was 40 years old, and they took a picture of it. It's in the book. Still got the cowboy hat on the hall in the at our living room, and it was a super situation. And then we had the beer tent afterwards because it was the Fountain Centennial of this little town of Fountain where Tony was from a dairy farm in Michigan. And I never knew anybody from a farm before, so we met at Michigan State, and the rest is history. But at any rate, I won the race, and I won about 8 races out of 1,000 races. But I got started at age 40, so.
Yeah. Well, I think I want to end on this note, and that is running has made a traveler out of you. In Michigan, we've got all kinds of different places. River Rouge, Flint, Blissfield, Lapeer, Ludington, and Alaska. That's not Michigan, but...
Yeah. Well, Ludington is my other home. That's Tony's neighborhood, and her Uncle Tim had the national record for the half mile at Ludington High School, which is in the book several times. We drove to Alaska, 1994, and that's a very interesting chapter about all the other races we ran in Illinois and in Texas and in New Orleans and, several other places. But Fort Richardson, Alaska, it was all the guys from the Army, and one guy listed himself as Crazy Billy. And he was chasing me the whole way. We went up 2.5 miles, 800 feet we had to rise. We were almost walking, and I was second in the race. And I only had 1 second of beauty looking down at the lights. Well, actually, it was all lit up. It was morning in Anchorage. And amazing view. And then I looked behind me, and there were 15 people about to pass me, and we had to go downhill. And then it was 800 feet down, and it was just a matter of not falling. Breaking the 5-minute mile, of course, it's downhill. It's like falling off a cliff. And so I ended up second in that race, and it was quite an adventure. Yeah, 51 years old.
One question I always want to ask people, of all the races you've run, what's your favorite?
So many great ones. I've always loved the Crim here in Michigan. That's been one that I've run many years and snuck in 3rd place or something. I love the Crim. There's one called Rockville Center on Long Island, right about this time of year, where I slipped under, I snuck into the top 10 in my age group nationally with that, with a 35-13 in 1993. But it's not just for that. It's for the camaraderie there, people I've known over the years. McQuaid's Pub afterwards, and actually there's a cathedral there, and then everybody watches Notre Dame play football after that race. So Rockville Center is a big favorite, plus the ones we have in Patchogue and out here by our place at Commerce. It's hard to pick one. I love them all, and I wrote down in the book about all the good people who ran all these good races and did well, and so this book essentially makes heroes out of people who already were, and now they'll be in a book about running over the last 50 years, and Dr. Ed Kozlov will fill in about the 50 years before that, and so on. But at any rate, this is the time of our lives, and I hope to celebrate all the good people who ran.
Well, Maury Dean, it's been fun talking to you about just a little slice of your running career. Thank you.
Thank you very much.